Hello, this is Tom, aka Gedeon here for Tabletop Tap Room. Today's video is going to be the reports of the death of the OSR, greatly exaggerated. Thank you, Mark Twain, for such a great quote. And before we get into the video, I just want to say, because I was recently reminded, I've not been saying this, but thank you for subscribing. But if you haven't subscribed, please do hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon. Help me build the channel. Appreciate that. Get that out of the way. And here we go. Now, this past week, one of my friends sent me a link saying, hey, this popped in my notifications. And it was a video. The title of the video was Death of the OSR Movement, or, in parentheses, at least its relevance. And so I consider myself to be part of the OSR movement. I'm wearing an OSR gaming t-shirt, right? So I thought, well, that's an interesting title. Let's hear what this guy has to say. And happened to be in the car. And so we piped it from the smartphone into the car speakers and listened to it on the ride back to Maine. And OMG, it's this guy all over the place. So I'm listening to it, and I'm trying to pick apart his argument. I'm trying to, find his major points, and, came to a realization. He had read a book, and he'd taken the chapter headings from the book, or the major points from the book, and then applied it to this. I could identify that in his rant, because he kept, and so I could hear those specific chapter headings. And then at the very end, he was reading the live chat. And when he was reading the comments from the live chat, and at one point he says, "You're the only person here who didn't come from my conspiracy theory channel." I was like, OMG, I thought I was really listening to somebody who was part of the gaming community. But no, I was listening to a conspiracy theorist who also just happens to be interested in gaming. And he went off on the OSR. The OSR is dead. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, oh witch, the wicked OSR. So, it was interesting. Now, because I spent all this time all up in my head, marshaling thoughts on, all right, this is what he's saying. This is his argument. This is his thesis statement. It had me thinking about the OSR. It had me thinking about what is the OSR? What is the significance and relevance of the OSR? And so those are questions I do want to address. Now, I'm actually going to link I'll link the video. But I please encourage you, do not feed his views. But if you feel you must, I will put the link there in the show notes. Trust me, don't do it. Because what YouTubers do is we go into the YouTube studio, we look at our content page, and we go, oh, I did the OGL, and look how my views blew up. Oh, I covered new TSR, bankruptcy, and look how my views blew up. Woohoo! Do more of that. I think he should stick to conspiracy theory. I really do. I don't encourage him to go, oh, wow, look, I covered gaming. I should cover more gaming. That's what I'm saying. Please don't feed the process. This is Death of the OSR Movement, or at least its relevance, by Blueberry Wolf Bridge, aka No Intro RPG. And hour and a half, and his basic thesis statement was, when you boiled it all down, his basic thesis is D&D is 5e. And if it ain't 5e, it's your SOL. Just forget about it. That's his basic thesis statement. And so, I guess from his perspective, the OSR movement is dead. He doesn't like the OSR movement or whatever. But that's the basic thesis statement. He sets up a straw man argument, very narrow definition of what the OSR can be, uses as examples people who are going back and wearing concert t-shirts from the 60s, trying to be hippies. And his thing is if you The OSR is a nostalgia movement, and so you're trying to go back to your youth, and if you didn't live it, you can't be OSR, which makes no sense. But we'll just go with that narrow definition. So that excludes a lot, and like kids wearing concert T-shirts, wearing a Nirvana concert T-shirt, and they were a little baby when Nirvana was playing. They didn't live it, that like offends him. And so he uses that as part of his example and argument that you have to have lived it to be able to go back to it, which is just kind of ludicrous. I don't have to have lived music from the 50s to like it and to study it, play it all the time, and that's what's on play and repeat around here. No, I don't. I'm not that big into the 50s, but I'm just saying, so that's part of his argument. It's very narrow. And, and then he says, and look, OSR, it's a tiny scene. It's dead. He uses examples, like cherry-picked examples, like I forget the guy's name now. Basic Fantasy. His YouTube channel only has I think it was 2,000 subs. He specifically mentions 10 Cars channel, 10 Cars Tavern. It's one of the biggest in the OSR. Only has 3,000. Yeah, it's kind of funny because if you notice here, let me blow this up, put it big on screen. His subs there are 166 when I did this screenshot. Now, when we listened to him, his subs were 158, because when he started throwing subs around and taking dumps on people, I was like, how many subs does he have? It was 158 when we listened to him. 158 or 154. It was low. So, but his narrow definition of the OSR means he gets to exclude people like Dungeon Craft, Professor Dungeon Master. Professor Dungeon Master, Deathbringer RPG, he's over 100,000. He's over 100K. And I would consider him OSR, but, having a really narrow definition, this is it, only within these lines. It excludes anything that would invalidate your argument. So having that narrow straw man definition that lets you knock it out, knock it down, works very well for a guy like this. I did this Venn diagram to help define the OSR. You've got fans who are part of the OSR. You've got bloggers and YouTubers who are part of the OSR. You've got third-party publishers who are part of the OSR. Okay, now let's take third-party publishers. You've got some third-party publishers. They publish 1E compatible adventure, but then they turn around and they will publish a 5E, the same adventure for 5E, because they don't care who you are and what game you play. They just want to sell you a product. They want to make money. They want to stay in business. And this is just good business sense. So, they're selling 5E product and they're selling 1E products. Are they still OSR? Does selling 5E product invalidate them from being OSR? And does everybody at that company have to have played 1E to be OSR? So if the whole company is staffed by people who are not old enough to have played 1E, can they, by that very narrow definition, you have to play, I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago. I was there, I played 1E, therefore I could be OSR. No. Okay, they're supporting the OSR market by selling to it. They could have 20-year-olds doing the artwork. They could have 30-year-olds who are writing the games and the materials. You don't have to be an old fart like me. All right, it's really okay. So third-party publishers, YouTubers, and bloggers. Just because I report on the OSR sometimes, not the whole be-all and end-all of my existence. I do consider myself part of the OSR, yeah. And fans. All right, fans might have a game that they like to play, but they might also play 5e, like Professor Dungeon Master. All right, he's got his Deathbringer OS, which is very much an OSR game, but maybe by that very super narrow definition, it can be excluded. But it's very much an OSR game. But he also runs a 5e game for his kids and their friends. So I mean, does that invalidate him from? No, he's part. It's a very loose. You choose to be associated with the group. And so I've done this Venn diagram to show the circles, and in the middle is the OSR. And there are some things that's just not OSR, and that's okay. And I still participate with them. I mean, I went to a convention last year and played in a 5e game. It was kind of a weird Peanuts meets Call of Cthulhu. Yeah.
It so was.
It was, yeah. The good wife's over there. She played in the game with us. And oh my God, the biggest name in the OSR, Eric Tenkar, played in the game with us. and Jason Elliott, the owner of Solarian Games. Oh my God. I mean, I'm not even sure if he's OSR because he's doing, a second edition of Top Secret. Although maybe he is because, he got Merle Rasmussen, the original writer of the original Top Secret, to write this new Top Secret. So it's a spiritual, there is a spiritual connection to the original Top Secret with this new Top Secret. So maybe it is an OSR company. So I don't know. I mean, so you got all these OSR people playing 5e. Does that does that mean we got to tear up our OSR card? I don't know. And it was Call of Cthulhu storyline as well. So I don't know. It's easy to set up a straw man and then knock it down. And look, the OSR is, if you choose to support the OSR, then you're part of the OSR. And if you buy an OSR product, that doesn't make you OSR. It just means you were curious, you bought it, you read it. Maybe this game's not for me. That's okay too, because the third-party publishers are happy to sell you the product anyways. Mr. Wolf, Blueberry Wolf, goes on about nostalgia loops, and that these nostalgia, and I believe this is the conspiracy theorist in him. I suspect, that there's this mystical loop, and it just keeps going around every 20 years, and it brings back, and somehow this nostalgia loop brings back the 80s, and it creates a wave of popularity of D&D, and it starts in the 80s, where 77 through 87. Basic D&D, advanced D&D, first wave of popularity, because it's the 80s. I think the first wave of popularity was really built on the satanic panic, that people were saying, no, this is the devil. It made people curious. They bought it. It made kids want it more, made us want it to rebel. That's what I really think. It was nothing intrinsically mystical about the 80s. So you go through the 90s, you have second edition. It waned in popularity. And then about 97, Wizards of the Coast bought D&D. But you get this next wave of popularity now, starting in the 2000s with 3.5. And so you get this second wave of growth and popularity and cultural impact and engagement with 3.5. It becomes really big. And then it wanes. And now with fifth edition, you're getting this thing, but he keeps going, and the 80s and the 80s and the 80s, and one of his arguments is that for right now, Stranger Things, it's the 80s, and he goes and he says the evidence of this is that you can't have a discussion of D&D without discussing Stranger Things, and I'm like, yeah, I can. To invalidate his argument, all I've got to do is find one discussion of D&D that has no connection to Stranger Things, and his argument's invalid. And the sad thing is I discuss D&D all the time without any thought or reference to Stranger Things. So, he's kind of stuck on this, but I really think if you just look at it as not as a cycle and we're back, it's that all us 12-year-olds in the 80s, we grew up when we went to college. All these people went off to college and got focused on school and family, getting married, having kids. And yeah, nostalgia caused you to come back to D&D in the 2000s. That's what brought me back to D&D. I was, a little bit of nostalgia, but it didn't make me come back and go, I must play 1E. No, I came back to D&D. I realized that there'd been a couple editions. I found a group and I joined it. And I didn't like 3.5. And then fourth edition came out. I said, well, let's try this. This might, I didn't like the whole 3 hours to do one combat. This is boring. Okay. It's like watching paint dry. Okay. And for the past 10 Monday nights, our magic user has to reread the description of Fireball and spend 30 minutes figuring out how he's going to cast it, where he's going to center it. And I'm like, 30 minutes for this guy to do one spell. And I'm like, pulling my hair out. And it's the same every week. It was driving me nuts. So 4E came out and I was like, hey, I bought all the books. I said, let's try this, and got people to try it. And then we were like, we're not sure we like 4E. And so I actually walked away from 3.5 and 4E and went back to basic. Okay. So nostalgia brought me back, but it didn't keep me there. Okay. I didn't go to the OSR out of nostalgia. I went out of the OSR because I was looking for a better set of rules. So looking for rules that were not slow play, that weren't watching paint dry. That's what I was looking for. And so that's why I kind of went to the old school and started engaging with the old school. Sure, nostalgia brought me back, but it didn't keep me there. And, even with Star Frontiers, yeah, nostalgia caused me to go looking for Star Frontiers on the web, find a fan magazine. Well, this is great. Start reading it. Yeah, nostalgia brought me back, but that's not what made me an editor of fan magazines. That's not what keeps you there. Nostalgia can bring you there, but it won't keep you there. It has to be other factors. And so this, nostalgia loop idea just does not work. His arguments really boil down to, if you want any hope of playing a role-playing game, you must learn 5e rules and maybe Call of Cthulhu as a backup. That's a direct quote from him. And in the past year, I would say 90% or more of all the role play I've played have not been 5e or Call of Cthulhu, although I'm much more open to Call of Cthulhu. And then at the end of his video, as much as he says, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love everybody. I don't think he loves everybody. And again, this is it, is that despite his thesis statement being 5e is where it's at, and the 25 I love yous at the end, I love everybody, he took a lot of dumps on a lot of people. And I made a list of it just because I found that fascinating. Despite the fact that he loves everybody, there are people he really doesn't like. And this is the comprehensive list. that's his hour and a half long rant. And that's why you don't need to go check him out. Unless you want the the laugh factor, maybe. I don't know. It's most people I've talked to who try to watch him are like, yeah, I had to check out after 10 minutes. So now what I'd like to bring this around to is the irrelevance of the OSR. So to do that, I think we need to take a look at this Venn diagram that I did, and let's address the relevance of the OSR, and that is the OGL crisis, where a multi-million-dollar company, Wizards of the Coast, supposedly made $1 billion during COVID. Retreated like they were beat with a whip. Retreated. What's a famous retreat, honey? She can't think of one. I can't think of one right now. I just thought of one, but I don't want to offend any French viewers. but yeah, Watsy packed it up and retreated like they got absolutely blown out of the water over this OGL thing. Now, that wasn't completely the OSR. I've done a Venn diagram here. I think that was multiple groups working together and cooperating. The OSR, for certain, the fans were up in arms, third-party publishers, YouTubers and bloggers. The hate and the bad press was just so bad, such a firestorm. We could say in a different word, but such a storm of poop coming down on Watsy's head. They totally retreated, and then they made a mistake when they took the 5e SRD and put it in Creative Commons, because they didn't go through and strip out of that things that have been long considered D&D identity, and so now we have Beholders and Strahd in the Creative Commons, and they can't take that back. So they really tripped up in what they did, and we don't necessarily have the stats for Beholders, but we can certainly use the word Beholder, and we can use the word Strahd. We just gotta put a little different spin on it, and we can use those things. And they screwed that up. Because they were in retreat, and when you're in retreat, you make panic decisions, and they did. So the significance of the OSR is we participated along with everybody else, not to take all the credit. We participated and we drove a multi-million-dollar company into retreat. That's not insignificant. That is not insignificant, but it was the whole community coming together in agreement, with pitchforks and torches, and ready to burn the monster. So that's not insignificant, and you can't downplay that. The OSR is significant. It's only one circle in this larger diagram, to be sure, and I kind of float in several of these other circles, not just in the OSR. There is significance to the OSR, and as long as people are interested and third parties are interested in selling and making money, and you've got bloggers, I dare say that Questing Beast is not as old as I am. Yet he seems to have an interest in some of the old school stuff. Well, when I'm gone, and he's the old fart, and he's still talking about the OSR will still be here. Okay, as long as people are still interested in the games, it'll still be here. So it's not dead yet. The reports of its death and demise are greatly exaggerated. Now, as to the OGL, what happened with the OGL, and will anybody rise up to dethrone WotC. Well, I'm going to equate what happened with the OGL and then WotC's retreat to this biography that I read a long time ago in the 80s. And this guy here, I couldn't remember his name, but I remembered the stories he told, Roger Enrico. And he was the CEO of Pepsi during the Cola Wars when they were doing the Pepsi Challenge, and then Coke came out with New Coke. And so he titled his biography, The Other Guy Blinked. When Coke came out with New Coke, he was like, the other guy blinked. And that's when Pepsi surged forward. Because, I mean, Coke pissed people off. It didn't matter that they had Bill Cosby, America's family father figure. Okay, it didn't matter that they had him shilling for New Coke. They pissed people off. Now, he tells an interesting story. He tells an interesting story in the foreword of his biography about how, as a young executive at Frito-Lay, and another executive was bringing around, giving him the tour, showing him the stuff, and so they're touring, and the older exec is telling him, a young exec, about this story, how at one point one of the food scientists, who I guess was also an exec and could make decisions, came up with this idea that I could substitute this ingredient for this ingredient and save money on Fritos. Now, I find that odd because if you've read the ingredients for Fritos, Fritos are cornmeal, oil, and salt. I mean, it really doesn't get any simpler than that. So I can't even imagine what this guy substituted. But what happened is he did this thing, and instantly they saw a massive drop in Frito sales in a month. And so this, a drop like that was that big. Whoa, what's going on? And so an investigation was done, and they found out what had happened, and they fired the guy. And the older exec giving this young exec the tour says, and the moral of that story is, don't F with the Fritos. And I never forgot that, partly because it's alliterated. You get that, don't F with the Fritos. It kind of flows. But if you've got the secret sauce, you don't mess with it. Okay, and what WotC tried to do was mess with the secret sauce. The secret sauce was the OGL. The OGL allowed all these third-party publishers to, they're a drop in the bucket, but they helped feed a market that helped build D&D into this huge monster brand. And they messed with the secret sauce, is what they did. And they had to beat feet into retreat. Now, is there any iteration of D&D out there, any third-party D&D that's going to dethrone Wizards of the Coast? I don't know. Okay, the analogy between Pepsi and is not a great analogy, because Pepsi really had some market share and they were positioned to surge forward. Maybe Pathfinder can, but no, I don't know. I don't think so. I think they made a misstep with their second edition. It didn't have the popularity of the first edition. I don't know that they're really positioned to surge ahead. But it might be that the RPG market's too fractured. You really had two companies. You had Pepsi, you had Coke. There were some other companies, but they were so minuscule in the market share, they really didn't count. The RPG market might be too fractured for there to be a Pepsi to surge forward and dethrone Wizards. Very likely that's the case. However, I think if we had an ecosystem where you've got a orc license, we've got one license that pretty much most everybody goes to, or that even if you're not using the orc license, it's very easy to which is kind of what we have. You have a lot of 1E compatible or basic compatible. It's if I could go sit in on a game I haven't read the rules to. I could go sit in on a Castle and Crusades game. I'm not really a fish out of water that badly with that. There'll be a few wrinkles, but I'm sitting in. Somebody else is the game master. I will do all right. You'll keep me straight. No, roll this. Don't roll that. Oh, yeah. Nope. This roll. Oh, okay. And I'll adjust and I'll pick it up quick. It's really not a problem. I think we're not looking for a Pepsi. I think we're looking for an ingredient to Pepsi. That everybody's using water. Okay. I think that's what it is. And that water is the most dominant ingredient in Pepsi and a lot of sodas. So, all right, you're drinking RC Cola, you're drinking Dr. Pepper, you're drinking, Pepsi, you're drinking Diet Pepsi, you're drinking Tab. Okay, fine. But the most dominant ingredient, all these things, is water, and we can agree on that. And I think that is where we're at, that probably not going to dethrone the most popular version of D&D that has ever been. But we're not really all that beholden to them now that we have the SRD and the Creative Commons. Okay, D&D really does belong to the community. And the OSR is part of that. Although the OSR probably doesn't give two flips for the 5e SRD, but whatever. It's certainly opened eyes in the community and painted the way for people to say, you know what? I don't need no stinking OGL. In fact, I just heard a rumor today that the next iteration of Castles and Crusades will be OGL free. I was like, there you go, baby. That'll work. And Stars Without Number. Let's not use the OGL. They didn't use the SRD. They just wrote a rule set. And it's very recognizable because you can't copyright the rules. You can copyright the other stuff. And so they just wrote a thing, and we're not beholden. We don't care. And, so I think that's where we're at, is that you're going to see more of the Shadow Darks, 5e rules with OSR sensibilities. Fantastic. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about these other licenses. Just use this license and screw the OGL. Screw WotC. Yeah. So the OSR is not dead. Fandom's not dead. Third-party publishers are not dead. Bloggers, vloggers, bloggers, not dead. We're all still going. And the reports of the death of the OSR and its irrelevance are greatly exaggerated. This is Tom for Tabletop Tap Room, signing out. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks to my subscribers. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, bell icon, and keep on gaming.
Come on.
All right, look.
Sorry, babe, but you're really skewering somebody's
expression. It's
I know,
don't.
but
It's an expression of speech.
you
So
wouldn't let Justin make that expression. If you called Eric a monster, you'd be like all over that.
No, I would actually welcome Justin Lanassa stepping up his low Lanassian and actually using a literary expression of speech. I would actually think that would be an improvement in his case. We're going to start over.
I gotta let the cat in, so.
Sure. Letting the cat in. We're letting the cat in before we start the video, because the cat rules the damn house and she's complaining. Yes, we understand. There goes the cat.